and it was hushed. And some guys took flamethrowers and ran after people and incinerated them. It was horrifying. It's forbidden to tell. I'm not going to talk about it because it could cause a huge scandal.
Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show, everyone. Keaton and Russ here with Dr. Gabor Maté filling in for Jimmy this week. Russell, go ahead.
You mentioned how many Jews, even outside of Israel and inside of Israel, are just completely brainwashed into this fanatical Zionism. At the time that I was growing up, there was really no questioning it. By that time, we weren't even really aware that there had even been a debate about this. Mm-hmm. We just grew up in a world where Zionism and Judaism were inextricably linked. There was no separation between the two. Why? Holocaust. Any questioning of that? We went back to the Holocaust, and the idea that maybe the IDF and the Israelis might sometimes go too far. It was always a question of being pushed to it. The idea that Israel had been born in oppression and blood was something that was just not even discussed. I mean, it would not be anywhere in the media. Now, I've debated many Jewish Zionist Americans. The only thing I've ever shown anybody that made an impression was the film Tantora.
Yeah.
I think because it is such a counter narrative, because this is not, you're not talking about now. You're not talking about 20 years ago. You're talking about the very inception of Israel. So I'm going to play a little bit of this, and I want to get your comments. People went to Tantora. It was awful. Tantora was a rich village, beautiful houses. They lived there like Europeans, you know? And the women were beautifully dressed. This village was really... One guy raped there a 16-year-old girl or something of the sort. You understand? This is very ugly. There was one guy, he passed away. He was a savage. He just took them and murdered them in the enclosures. They were in enclosures, you know, surrounded by barbed wire. All the men were rounded up. They were all sitting on the ground. And someone comes and takes a machine gun and starts and then reloaded the cartridge. What do you think? But we weren't like that. He was exceptional, that guy. And what he did. And it was hushed. And some guys took flamethrowers and ran after people and incinerated them. It was horrifying. It's forbidden to tell. I'm not going to talk about it because it could cause a huge scandal. I don't want to talk about it. That's it. But it happened. What can you do? It happened. Now, watching this film, and you can see he's laughing as he talks about this. He's acknowledging this was horrible, but he's laughing about it. It seems like for his generation of Israelis, there's just an agreement of complicity, and to accept that complicity. One of the most remarkable things in that film was very subtle to me. People who live in the village now, they were talking about putting up a monument to the Arabs that had been killed in Tantora, and one of them says, well, they have those monuments in Berlin if you go there. So, which just is openly acknowledging, yes, we did to these people what was done to us. At the same time, subsequent generations, even Israelis I've talked to, they don't know this. They don't really know about this history. But when I did show this to an American Zionist, she came back crying and she said, wow, they did what was done to them. Huh? And I was like, yeah. And nobody ever told us about that. That is erased from the narrative. It's kind of a truism of psychology that the abused become abusers. Is Israel an entire society built on that principle?
Well, number of points, Russ. First of all, as you duly noted, notice the disconnect between what he's saying and his demeanor. If you shut off the sound, or if there wasn't subtitles, you'd think he was telling some jolly story.
Right. Yeah.
So even in acknowledging the truth, he's emotionally disconnected from it. It's completely disconnected.
Right.
And he's one of the few even willing to acknowledge what happened.
Right.
Now, what he says, of course, has been studied and documented by multiple Israeli historians. The rapes, the mass killings, the cruelty, the expulsions, and so on. But there's no emotional connection to it. And that itself is a defense against reality, which then allows the present to continue the way it is. Number one. Number two, the debate on Zionism didn't begin in 1948. It began at the very arising of the Zionist idea.
Right.
Most Jews were never interested in Zionism. At a time in the 1910s, when maybe 1905 to 1915, where maybe 30,000 Jews from Eastern Europe went to Palestine, 2 million came to the United States.
Right.
They were just not interested. And so this whole idea of we've been so connected to this country, we've always wanted to go back, is absolute historical nonsense. And there were Zionist leaders like Jabotinsky, the founder of the revisionist Zionism that became the Likud. He said very openly, and Ben-Gurion, the labor Zionist leader who became the first prime minister, they both said very openly that we call the Arabs terrorists, but actually they're just people defending their own homeland. People do the same thing.
Right.
So they knew what they were doing. And they openly acknowledged it. The difference between the Ben-Gurion and the Jabotinsky is that, at least privately, they told the truth.
Right.
Public consumption, oh, it's, we're the victims. But the debate around Zionism is not new. And what was unique is your experience. There was a generation or two when you couldn't debate it. That shifted now under the impact of the horrors of Gaza. That edifice has been shattered. And a lot of young Jews, and not just young Jews, are openly questioning, and never mind questioning, opposing it. I'm not sure what else there was in your question. If there's something I haven't answered, just repeat it, would you?
No, you answered it. I mean, I think when I was growing up, the whole assumption was that the founding of Israel was a demonstration of the arc of the universe bending towards justice. These people had been horribly abused, and look, they returned to their historic homeland, so-called, and the idea that the Arabs were proxies for the Nazis was unquestioned, and that continues in the Israeli narrative and in the Zionist narrative, the dehumanization.
It wasn't unquestioned by all of them. It was actually questioned by some, but those voices were marginalized.
Right, then it was,
But the other thing I would say is to American Zionists, if you really believe that Israel is the Jewish homeland, and historically we've always longed to return, well, get on the bloody airplane and go there. And move there, leave your apartments in New York, give up your Hollywood mansions, give up your businesses, go and relocate. If you really believe that, what's stopping you? There's such hypocrisy. It's like they want to keep this Middle Eastern territory as an insurance policy.
Right.
And they don't care who they have to displace, kill, dispossess, oppress, in order to maintain their insurance policy. I mean, if you really believe in the Zionist idea, and if you call yourself a Zionist, what are you doing here? Nothing's stopping you. If you say you've been longing to go back there for 2,000 years, well, that's great. All you have to do is buy a ticket.
Right.
And
why do you think so many don't? I mean, why do you think not as many do?
And within 2 days, you'll be a citizen. And on the third day, you can move to the West Bank and get 6 times as much water as the average Palestinian is allowed. And you'll be allowed to dig wells and have a swimming pool in your settlement, while the Palestinians can't even dig wells in their own land. And you can torment them, you can beat them up, and you can shoot them, and nobody's going to punish you for it. So do it if you're a Zionist. And if you're not a Zionist, and if you're not willing to do that, you're not a Zionist. You're just somebody who wants an insurance policy.
Well, and as an insurance policy, I must say, I have seen, and we predicted this as soon as October 7th happened. I've never seen real anti-Semitism become so mainstreamed and normalized as it has since October 7th, because it is certainly not to the benefit of the Jewish people to have Zionists insisting that Judaism and Zionism are one as people watch the live streaming of a genocide. Yeah. Do you worry that this is going to lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy on the part of the Zionists, where there's a huge anti-Semitic pogrom really in the West?
No, I'm not. I actually am not worried about it. It's true that there's no better way to foster anti-Jewish sentiment than to identify what Israel is doing with Jewishness itself. I mean, right. you couldn't devise a better method to convince people to dislike Jews.
Yes.
But I think most people are capable of making that distinction that the Zionists don't make, is that Jewishness is not the same as Zionism. All the more so since a lot of Jews are speaking out against it now. Mm-hmm. And so this argument that we're fostering anti-Semitism by criticizing Israel, it's the opposite, you blind fool. We're actually protecting you by disengaging the idea of Jewishness from Zionism and Israeli policy. Number one. Number two, anti-Semitism, genuine anti-Semitism is far deeper than just certain feelings or certain opinions. Mm-hmm. It's actually a visceral disease, and it has nothing to do with the Jew. So that there's a story, if I can indulge in the storytelling, of a Roman emperor, I don't know, 1st, 2nd century Common Era, who was riding on his chariot through Rome, and he sees a Jew who greets him, and the emperor says, "Punish him. How dare a mere Jew address the emperor of all Rome?" A few minutes later, another Jew who's heard about this sees the emperor and just ignores him. And the emperor says, "Punish him. How dare a mere Jew ignore the emperor of all Rome?" And his attendants say to him, "But Imperial Majesty, on the one hand, you punish the one for greeting you, the other for not greeting." He says, "You don't get it. I don't care what they do. I just hate them for who they are." Mm-hmm. And the visceral anti-Semitism that I experienced in Hungary myself growing up, it had nothing to do with what I did or any Jew did. It had to do with the diseased imagination of the anti-Semite. And that's not the same as, certainly is not the same as anti-Zionism, and it's certainly not the same even as occasional anti-Jewish sentiment. Right. And when we talk about rising anti-Semitism, really, what's the proof for it? If we identify Israel with Jewishness, then of course anybody who criticizes it is by definition an anti-Semite. But does the average Jewish person in the United States afraid to walk down a block because they're Jewish? Are they going to lose their jobs because they're Jewish? Are their children not going to be able to allow certain schools, which used to be the case in the States until a few decades ago? But is that the case now? Is their livelihood going to be threatened because they're Jewish? Are they going to be afraid to worship their religion because they're Jewish? No, that's largely not the case. And is it true that racism in general is burgeoning in a society? Yes. And Jews certainly are one target of it. But in Canada, where I live, would I rather be an Indigenous Canadian walking down the street or a Jew walking down the street? Which is the most likely to get me beat up by the police?
Right.
In certain areas of town. In the United States, which is more likely to get killed living in my own neighborhood? A Jewish person or a black person? Who's more likely to be threatened? A colored person or a Caucasian person? So on a practical level, I just don't see it. Now, are there not incidents? Yes, there are. There was that terrible massacre in that synagogue some years ago. There was also a terrible massacre at a black church.
Right.
There was the killing of these two people in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. There was also the knifing death of a 6-year-old Palestinian child. I'm not saying that the two balance or somehow one explains or justifies the other. Nothing justifies any of it. But let's not create this belief that somehow it's exclusive or especially virulent towards Jews. That's just not true.
Come see us live. Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, London, Liverpool, Birmingham. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.